Hi, everybody. Have I told you the one about Grandma Cooper's corpse? This is a whopper. This is a really big story. Um, Anyways, Grandma Cooper's corpse. I'm Smith. That's my dad's side. My mother's side is Cooper. Grandma Cooper was my mom's mom. And, well, anyways, ugh. It's just a big story because it's hard to tell stories about your grandmother's corpse. It's a good one. I got some business to do at the beginning, though. First, I want to say I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm learning as I go. It's good to learn things all your life. It doesn't matter how pretty you are, you always have things to learn because pretty doesn't last. Brains do. So I realized that I can't actually edit the video. So the Q&As, everybody gets access to them. So you just turn it off whenever you get bored. And I want to say that this show happens every week, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or whatever, 8 p.m. in the Pacific. And it's live. So if you want to see it live, you can. This is how it works. I have a magic story bag and I draw the story the next day. Yesterday, we drew Grandma Cooper's corpse. So that's the story I'm telling today. I want to give a really big shout out to my BFF, Colin Thomas, and all of his Scruff crew. He's been talking to people on Scruff and sending them little messages with saying, look me up to watch my show. So if you're out there, send me a little note, hey, girl. And I am very happy to say that my first story, which was only 2 days ago, has 399 views. You could be the 400th view, but don't do it until after this. And I have over 130 subscribers. So thanks. That's really freaking exciting. Tomorrow is my birthday, and it would be great if you picked any of the 3 stories you like best and posted it on your social media and told people about it, because it'd be fun to have other people watch. But I decided I don't really care. I'm just going to be myself, and who cares about numbers? Fuck numbers. There you go. That's all my business. Now, so my family lives in they all live in a little tiny place. They all live within like 20 minutes drive of each other. We lived an hour away in this city. So both sides of my mom and my dad's side, they all live near each other. In fact, my grandmother Cooper lived right next to the beer store. So she knew everything that was going on with the Smith side, who liked to drink, because she could watch them coming and going. So I'd show up at my grandma Cooper's and she'd say, oh, your grandfather, meaning the other one, Ron, my dad's dad, who was a drunk. Your grandfather, he was at the liquor store yesterday, or the beer store yesterday, and he was there today. He got a 2-4 both days. And so I knew what my grandparents' drinking habits were because my other grandmother paid attention. It was a small town. So my dad's dad, the middle one, Ted, he calls up. Well, my dad calls me up and says that Ted called him up. And anyways, I'm kind of telling this out of order, but whatever, it's live. Dad phones me when I'm at my sister's house. We're all hanging out, and he says, okay, I got some weird news for you. Have you heard about your Grandma Cooper? And I was like, no. And he said, well, I think your Grandma Cooper is dead. I was like, oh, fuck. The story I heard from your Uncle Ted, his brother, Dad's brother, was that your Uncle Bob, on my mom's side, your Uncle Bob got arrested downtown for transporting a corpse, and your grandmother is dead. I was like, holy crazy shit. Like, that is some crazy ass shit. Now, there are a few things you need to know. We'd have to unpack that first. The reason why I would find out through the grapevine that this had happened is because we don't talk to my Uncle Bob, and we didn't talk to my grandmother we hadn't talked to her for 10 years. Anyways, my grandmother growing up, my parents didn't get along. They weren't like the best partners in the world. They were good people, not very good partners. Dad drank all the time. We were really poor. It was really stressful. So we'd go visit my grandmother. My grandmother loved us unconditionally. And this is the story. When I put all the stories in my little magic story bag, I said to my husband, God, I hope I don't pick Grandma Cooper's corpse anytime soon, because it's a big one. And by coincidence, somebody told me, oh, well, when you're telling your stories, you really should pick a person that you're talking to. And I thought maybe I should pick my Grandma Cooper. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do stories and be chipper and be a big old homo for Grandma in heaven. Maybe she'd probably love it. But I just don't want to talk to a dead person. So I decided to talk to Teddy. Teddy's the teddy bear that my grandmother gave me when I was a child. What's that, Teddy? You want to say hi? Oh, you can say hi. Look, he's waving. So she gave me Teddy when I was a kid, and it was handmade by somebody in the neighborhood. And whenever I got older, my mom took all my stuffed animals and put them at the curb in a big box. And Grandma happened to be visiting that weekend. She lived an hour away. She drove into town, saw the stuff at the curb, and said, "What's that?" And we told her, and she was like, "Well, you're not throwing these out." And she took my favorite stuffed animal and my sister's favorite stuffed animal, and she kept them for a freaking decade. For a decade. And at Christmas one year, my grandmother, Teddy was missing his arm. My grandmother brought the teddy bear. We didn't know where the arm was. So she brought the teddy bear back to the original owner, like 20 years cap out. It looked like I capped out. Anyways, what I was saying was, this is a teddy bear amputee. And my grandmother gave it back to me with this little note saying, I love you. You're great. You're the best grandson ever. So that's my Grandma Cooper. I loved her unconditionally. But she was a little bit paranoid. Whenever my mom was 16, her grandmother died, my Grandma Cooper's mom. She died, and the whole family got into a great big fight. And my grandmother, they all fought over the will. My grandmother lived next to her sister, my Aunt Theresa, my great Aunt Theresa, my entire life, and I never talked to her. They lived side by side in neighboring houses, and I wasn't allowed to talk to her. One day I said hello, and I got such a talking to. My grandmother was like, that woman is evil, and you are not to talk to her when you are on my property. You are never to talk to her again. And then she went over to the fence and yelled at her sister and said, Theresa, you old bitch, don't you be talking to my grandkid, blah, blah, blah. My grandmother was really paranoid. And throughout the course of my life, throughout the course of my mom's life, she got rid of all of that side of the family, all of her side of the family. And throughout the course of my life and my sister's life, she got rid of all my grandfather's side of the family. She just cut people out one by one. And she just cut us out too. The circle got smaller and smaller and smaller. And suddenly we were on the outside of it. And she didn't trust us. And she was really suspicious. She cut my sister out first, and then my mother. And well, my mother cut her out when she cut my sister out. Anyways, and I saw her for a little while and talked to her. And then I just couldn't handle it because she lives with my Uncle Bob, who got arrested. Or I should say, my Uncle Bob lives with her. He's the one who got arrested for allegedly transporting a corpse. So that's who my Grandma Cooper is, and that's why we hadn't heard from her in 10 years. So when we called my Uncle Ted, he didn't know anything. So what do you do? Well, we thought, okay, he got arrested. Let's call the police. So they live in a tiny little town, Kempville. It's about 40 minutes from Ottawa. Now it's like an Ottawa bedroom community. And back then it was probably 1,500 people. It was really tiny. Maybe it's 2,000. I don't know. It's very small. It's no more than 3,000 people tops. It's getting bigger all the time. I know. Bedroom communities are like that. So we call the police and we say, I got this weird message from my uncle who heard that my grandmother had died, and my grandmother doesn't talk to us anymore, and she lives with my Uncle Bob, and my Uncle Bob is kind of a piece of work. So I just want to check in with you and see, did my Grandma Cooper actually die, and was my uncle arrested for transporting her corpse? And the cop was like, okay, we know who Bob Cooper is, and this is what I'm allowed to tell you legally. He was arrested. He was arrested for stalking somebody. I can't remember the technical name. He was arrested for stalking somebody. And he wasn't arrested for transporting her corpse. I don't know anything about your grandmother's death. And we were like, oh, well, that's weird. So what do we do now? And the cop was really sweet. He said, well, if I were you, I would call the funeral home because there's only one in town. And I was like, oh, that's really smart. So I hung up the phone. I told my mom, I was like, okay, what should I do? Should we, or maybe my mom made that call. I don't even remember. Isn't that weird? I remember all the details as if it were me. So let's just say it was me because I'm the hero of my story. So anyways, I talked to my mom and my sister. We're all hanging out in the house trying to figure out what to do. None of us, we don't have a clue. And you can't call home. You couldn't call my Uncle Bob. He wouldn't answer the phone. Bob is also really paranoid. Bob is quite the loon. And I actually have a story about him, so I'm not going to tell you a whole bunch about Bob. You just need to know that he is wildly paranoid and not very nice, not nice at all. He tormented me my whole childhood, and he is potentially violent. So he doesn't answer the phone. My grandfather died 23 years ago, and that for 20 years after his death, uh, they had on their answering machine, when you called and got the answering machine, you got his name on the answering machine. They had to change it. It wasn't just pre-recorded. They had to change it at some point because it all went electric. It wasn't on the little machine anymore. It was through, TELUS itself or whatever, voicemail, that thing. They recorded his name in there because they didn't want to have their names on their own telephone. They didn't like talking on the phone. They thought the phones were bugged. Hyper paranoid. Anyways, so we call the funeral home. And my mom says, I don't know if I want to do this. This is really intense. And I don't know how I decided I was going to do it. Like I said, I can do it. And so maybe it's because I was home and I never get to do things like this. Because they live in Ontario and I live in British Columbia. I live far away. That's far away in American terms. That's like New York State and Washington State. So anyways, I call the funeral home and I get somebody on the phone and I say, I heard that my grandmother, well, I gave the full name, Cooper, died. And I just want to check in because I'm estranged from my uncle and I haven't heard about it. And so I'm wondering if you know anything. And they were like, oh, Jesse Cooper. Okay, give me a minute. I'm going to have to talk to the director of the funeral home. And I said, are you going to talk to the director? Because that means you're going to hang up and you're going to call my uncle because he's kind of intense and he's a bit cray-cray. And I'm afraid that, he's just going to tell you not to tell me anything. But, I'd really like to find out. And she said, oh no, I'm familiar with your uncle. This is the catchphrase in Kempville. I'm familiar with your uncle. I'm familiar with your uncle. And I am just going to talk to the director because I need to know what I'm legally allowed to tell you. And then I was like, okay. And they hung up the phone. And then we talk about it for a few minutes. So here's the thing. So while we're waiting, we talk about it with my sister and my mom. And while we're waiting, we all said the same thing. Well, who was it? I think it was my mom and I said the same thing. I was like, the surprising thing is why would, like when we first heard that Bob was transporting a corpse to the morgue, we were like, that's so weird. I always thought he'd bury her in the basement because they have an old house and the basement is just a ground floor. It's just a dirt floor. So we always thought he would just dig up a grave and throw her in. Honest to God, to both of us. I think it was my mom and I. She might hate me for this. And because they were so intense, whenever my grandfather died, they'd already excised all of his family from their lives. They didn't talk to any of my grandfather's side. So I have no family except for my cousins on my dad's side and my aunts and uncles, but I have no family on my mom's side whatsoever. Not a soul I talk to. It's amazing. When my grandfather died, which was 25 years ago or so, Mom gave me a list of things. I called my mother and my sister to say, okay, I'm just giving you a heads up that, I'm going to talk about Grandma Cooper and the whole death story. So in case you're watching. And my mom gave me a list of things she wanted to make sure that I didn't forget. She had a whole little list that she gave me. So my grandfather died. They didn't tell anybody that he had died. They didn't tell any of his family. They all lived nearby. His niece used to live with him for years. They took her in when her husband died, and they didn't even tell her. And she was like she was like his own daughter in a way, right? Because he lived with them. She lived with them. Anyways, and by coincidence, her son showed up at the door that day. And my grandma, the day of the funeral, there was going to be a little funeral just in the living room of her house. She was going to have a little ceremony. And they had cremated him. And the day I think it was the day that he died. Yeah, the day that he died, she didn't tell anybody, right? She hadn't called anyone yet. just by coincidence, somebody showed up, and my grandmother was so paranoid she thought that they knew that Grandpa had died, and that's why they had come to his door. It's because and he was like, "No, it's just a coincidence. What's going on? I don't know what you're talking about." And that's how we found out that his uncle had died. They were just checking in to make sure he was still alive. Anyways, so they buried him in a pine box. Pine box. He was getting cremated. They didn't have a wake. They didn't invite anybody. Only the immediate family got to see, and those people who happened to come to the door. They managed to get invited, which was amazing. He was wearing no socks, pajamas. That's what and they in a pine box, and they were going to just send him off and bury him like that. And my mom was mortified, so she went to some fabric store and bought some satin to put underneath him. And my grandmother, my mom said, "Look, I think you need to, do something for Dad. Like he's just in a pine box. Like, hello, this is his last outfit, right? It's a bad way to go out. You might be comfortable. You're prepared for the Armageddon wearing your pajamas, but face it, how are you going to get any ladies while you're waiting for your old hag to show up?" I'm sorry, Grandma Cooper. Anyways, so Mom said, Mom, you need to do something about Grandpa or Dad. You can't just put him in there with nothing. So I bought him some fabric, and I want to get him a pillow. Like, where's his pillow? And Grandma was like, "Oh, no, I'm not going to give you his pillow." But you know what? He loved Benji, their dog, who had died that year. He loved Benji. Why don't you use the dog's pillow? And Mom was like, "Are you kidding me?" No. He loved that dog. He would be happy to have that pillow. So Mom brought the pillow to the funeral home, wherever they were going to burn his corpse, Grandpa Cooper's corpse. And she was really embarrassed because it was covered in fur. She didn't know how are you going to clean it when you're on, you get handed it and away you go. And she showed up, and wasn't it the son of somebody she went to school with from grade 1 to 13? And she was so mortified. She made a point. I wrote it down, embarrassed, because she wanted me to know, to tell you guys that she was super embarrassed about it. And the whole time that that they were there, that he was in the pine box, Grandpa was in the pine box, and they were fixing, this and that, the other thing. And my Uncle Bob, this is the nicest thing he's probably ever done, lifted Grandpa's head and put the pillow underneath the satin instead of on top. And he had his camera, and he was taking photographs. He was standing on a chair over top of his father's corpse in a pine box without any socks on, in his pajamas, and he was taking photos of the body. And my grandmother was poking him in the pelvis area to see if they had taken his diaper off, if he was still wearing his diaper. I wasn't there. That would have been crazy intense. I was on a plane home. Anyways, those are all the things that my mother wanted me to tell you about my Grandpa Cooper, and that's why we're so interested in this funeral. But I digress. So the phone rings, and it's the funeral director, and Mom talks to him, and he says, "Look, I know your uncle, your grandmother, your mother." He was talking to my mom, my grandmother. I keep doing that. "Your mother passed away in a hospital on such and such a date." This was in May, I think, that we were talking to. Yeah, this all happened in May. She passed away November, whatever it was, November 29th or something like that. She passed away 5 months before. 5 months. That's how long it takes a community of 3,000 people for word to travel around that somebody has died, who somebody else is trying to keep a secret. Just in case you're wondering on the metrics for that. And she died in the hospital. She died in the Winchester Hospital, which was about a half-hour drive away. They always hated the Kempville Hospital, so Bob packed her into a car when she wasn't feeling so great, and they went to the hospital, and she died peacefully from natural causes. And I'll tell you, we were so GD relieved by that. I couldn't believe, it was like, when the woman that you love the most in the entire world, who you trusted with your heart completely, my grandma never did anything to hurt me until she cut me out of her life. And that was mental illness. When that woman dies and you find out that she had been gone for 5 months before, it is a really weird experience. And that is the story of Grandma Cooper's corpse. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to call my husband into the room. Tomorrow night, we're going to have a special. Tomorrow happens to be my 49th birthday. So we're going to do the magic draw, the magic story bag. Is my husband coming? Where's my husband? I'm still married, I promise. He's going to draw the story for the magic story bag. So you have to get your hand in. Here, let's show them that it is the magic story bag. This is my husband, Francis. Francis, he's French. I say Francis. I just got nervously. I anglicized it for the Americans. Okay, stick your hand in there. Pull out the story I'm going to tell on my birthday.
Oh.
Oh, Jesus Christ. No, pick a different one.
It's not Halloween or anything. It's called My Father's Funeral.
You show them. It's a visual medium.
Oh.
My Father's Funeral. Oh, God. That's the story I'm going to tell on my 49th birthday. 7 times 7, 49. It's supposed to be a lucky year.
Bye, guys.
See you later. So you'll see more of him tomorrow. We decided that because it's my birthday, we'll have him. He's just going to sit with me, and I'm going to tell the story together. And he's going to be like my special guest, because why not mix it up? It's my fucking show. I can do whatever I want. So for my birthday, just before I go, I would really love it if you could pick one of your favorite stories from these 3 and post it on social media and tell people it's my 49th birthday. And it'd be great if people listened in and that these have been really fun. And maybe you could say why you find them fun, and don't talk about my appearance, because it's about the story. Anyways, you know what I mean. Whatever. Thanks for listening in. I really love it that so many people are, I don't know, just listening to me instead of me talking at the wall and my husband saying, have more interior time. Love you lots. Have a great time. Oh, okay, bye. And are there questions? There aren't any questions. Oh, what did your uncle do with the body for 5 months? Oh, no. My uncle didn't have the body, right? My grandmother was alive when he took her to the hospital. So he didn't get arrested for, that was at the beginning of the story. Maybe you missed the beginning. He didn't get arrested for transporting a corpse. He got arrested for stalking somebody. And it just so happened that we also knew that his mother was dead. Those 2 pieces of information got conflated in the rumor mill of the community. That's how rumors start and happen and get misconstrued. Okay, well, there you go. I'm going to say goodbye, and I love you all, and we'll see you tomorrow for my father's funeral. I promise you, it's a funny. There are lots of really great things in this story. It's not just sad. This one wasn't sad, right? It was my grandmother's corpse, and I loved her more than anybody in the world. I didn't care about my dad all that much, so, there you go. Okay, bye.